All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started. Thought we'd start by introducing myself. So, my name is Jared McMurray. I have a recovering agile coach there because I think over the past 3 or 4 years, I've learned a lot about everything I did wrong for the first 4 or 5 years. So, and that's what I want to share here today, is some of that with you all. I've become really passionate about product and product mindset, and so a lot of what I'm going to share with you, there's not an original thought in this deck. So it's just a lot of people who are really smart, who I've been able to connect with, or other people have connected me with them. So I work for a team of coaches that's kind of grown grassroots, and now I think there's about 13 of us. And what we're trying to do is change culture in a large company, so a financial institution. It was founded well before the internet. And so we approach technology a little differently, and we're trying to change that. So I'm hoping some of you have similar backgrounds and that I can share some stuff with you that'll help. So I want to start, though, with a little exercise. And so some of you that work with me probably have done this before, but I want you to just find a partner, somebody next to you, and interview each other. So take 3 minutes apiece. And the key here is that you're asking them what their most memorable meal is, all right? So it's not what their favorite meal is. It's what's the most memorable meal. And talk about that. I'll time it, and if I see people are starting to get done, we'll stop early. But go ahead and find a partner. All right, so you all look like you're having fun. Who wants to volunteer something they heard? Okay, go ahead. Oh, all right. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah. So something that we had in our discussion.
Yeah.
So she had a meal where it was like 9 courses, every course paired with like a different wine.
Got it. Got it. Anyone else? Ryan, want to share? You want to share?
Yeah. Well, she went down to Mexico and had escargot and steak, and it was the best steak that she'd ever had.
Nice. In Mexico, yeah. Yeah, sure.
He got married in Norway, and they served moose.
Oh.
That they shot right there and processed.
Oh, I was thinking like chocolate mousse.
No.
No, you like an actual moose. All right.
Absolutely
Yeah.
delicious.
Tastes like chicken?
No.
No.
Tastes like the highest quality beef you've ever had.
Yeah.
Really, really good.
All right, well, as long as there's no vegetarians in the room, we can all have moose someday, maybe. So some of the reasons I was talking about memorable versus favorite is I think you hit on it with some of the important relationships you've had. So it's not really just about the food, right? It's about the people you're with, where you were. It's always something different, right? So you kind of learn a lot more. Now, do you two know each other outside of this conference?
Yes.
Did you find out anything about each other that you didn't know?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to get back to this idea of empathy right after we get depressing for a little bit. But we'll get back to it. So how do we normally build products? And so I'm going to describe a couple different ways of talking about that. But first, I thought I'd start by just what do I mean when I'm saying product? Because where I work, we have a lot of insurance products and retirement products. And so it tends to be a reserved word, and people kind of get confused. So the late David Hussman kind of put it really easy. It's the thing we create that adds value for our customers. And we found that helps people kind of get over the mental gymnastics of figuring out what are our products. It's really about what we build to add value, right? And there's some implications there. So that means we know who that customer is, right? And we understand what they value. It's pretty easy. And then we understand kind of how these products interact with each other, because whether you're a small company or a large company, the idea is that people are using a lot of different software and technology products all day long, right? And then when I say we, I'm really talking about the cross-functional team, it's not just your product managers or your product owners or whatever they're called in your organization, right? You want your software engineers to know who your customers are because they're actually doing a lot of the work, right? So I thought I'd baseline there before I go into any more, just so we are all on the same page. And so does this sound familiar? In your organization, is this kind of how work comes down? Solutions are prioritized by leaders, and they're socialized with the next layer of management. They're kind of elaborated on with maybe different distinct silos of expertise, so we flesh out more details. And then at that point, they get handed to the product managers or the product owners. They get added to a roadmap and socialized with the delivery teams. And then those teams are asked to kind of thread that work in with everything else they've got to do. But be agile now. And this is the point when we get agile, right? And that's the last time you probably use the word agile. And then progress towards completion is like frequently communicated. So we're 25% done, we're yellow, we're green. And then teams deliver the work and they move on to that next solution that's coming through. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Is that kind of how your organizations work? So there's alternatives, and some of you probably work in organizations like this where what we have is strategic outcomes, and we know how we're going to measure that we've gotten those outcomes. And then your product teams are aligning their own objectives and key results to those outcomes. Problems or opportunities are identified through customer interaction and insight. We test ideas. We try to figure out, are people going to buy it? Can they use it? Can we build it? And then should we build it? Like, does this even make sense for our company, right? Bad ideas are thrown out. Validated solutions go from the lab to market in small iterations. Customer insights and leading indicators are measured. Decisions to persevere or pilot are made based on that data. Does this sound, or does anybody work in an organization like this? A few of you, yeah. What's that? I would have to go to your talk in the morning, right? So I want to talk about why those differences matter, but first of all, I want to talk a little bit about why is there a difference. And I think I kind of have a philosophy on that. So if you think of when technology was introduced into companies that were founded before the internet, or before like a lot of consumer technology. What were some of the things they were trying to accomplish? Construction? But what were they trying to accomplish with the technology? Automating what? Yeah. What else? Accounting.
Moving paper records to electronic records.
Paper records to electronic records, yeah. And these are all things used by people within the organization, right? So companies got started with technology building products for people who didn't have a choice. Just build it, check the box, give it to them. And so as we move towards, we're going to build technology for our customers, we kind of had those practices already in place. And we were successful for a long time because we did move paper records to electronic. We helped accounting, hopefully. But were we building the best product? If those people had a choice of another product, would they have chosen that? And of course, along with that comes the cultural hierarchies over time that don't really go away. So why does that matter? So Microsoft did a study where they evaluated all of the things they had delivered for maybe, I don't know, it was the past year or something like that. And they wanted to see if these things delivered the value that they had hoped, right? And what they found was a third landed, gave the value they hoped, a third had no result, and then a third actually had some sort of negative impact to their business or their customers. And so, you know, we may all be working for organizations that are like way better than Microsoft, but are you 2 times better? And so when you think about that idea just coming out of thin air, getting approved, not validated, running through the system, like, is that going to be the one that has a negative impact to your company? And can you really afford that anymore with all the threats that all of our industries have? And so that's kind of where you get into this IT mindset, product mindset thing. So this I stole from Marty Kagan, and I've got some links here out to the blog, but we basically summarized it down here. And there's a couple things here that I wanted to point out, and one is the passion. So in an IT mindset, also maybe like a project mindset, product and tech are mercenaries. So they're there to knock stuff out, right? And if you need more stuff knocked out, well, we'll just get more mercenaries, bring them in. With product mindset, product and tech are missionaries. They're out there to try to achieve some goal, and they know what that goal is, and they know what the value they're trying to bring to the organization is. And everything they do aligns to that. And the only other one, and I lied, I'm going to say agile again, but in the IT mindset, we are agile for delivery. So everything leading up to that point's a big waterfall, and then we have our team start to iterate through it, right? So whatever that lead time is, I don't know, because it doesn't hit JIRA until it gets to a team, and that's when we start tracking things, right? Okay. Whereas product mindset, it's end-to-end agility. We need to be able to do these things quicker. And if you've got a large group of people who need to do things quicker, it's maybe we need to work together. Does any of this stand out in your own organizations? Anything in particular? It's probably hard to read that from back there. All right, well, just something to think about. So how do we go from focusing on output, getting these things done, being mercenaries about it, to focusing on outcomes? And so what I want to talk about from this point forward are just some things you can try and things you might want to dig into. So I hope some of it's new to you, and I hope it helps. So is anybody familiar with objectives and key results, this framework? A lot of nods and head nod, yeah. So I know we've been working on this for a while, and it's really hard. We're not very good at it yet. But the idea is that you've got this memorable qualitative description of what you want to achieve, and then you know how you're going to measure it. And so an objective wouldn't be like, deliver this thing by third quarter, and we're going to measure it because we delivered it. It would be, the example I like to use is we worked for a little bit with the folks at Target, and the one that sticks with me is the objective was no slimy chicken. So what do you think of when you hear that? Fresh, yeah, we don't want spoiled chicken, right? And so some of their measures were, we're able to notify the store within 95% of the time before the store finds out. And there was some inventory loss metrics in there. And that's what the product team was given as a mission. What they weren't given was, here's a vendor you're going to work with, and you're going to buy this, and you're going to install it, or here's how I want you to solve the problem. It's really like, this is what we're going for, this is how we know success, and letting the product manager work with their engineers to try to bring that to fruition. And so with this, if you're in an organization where the solutions seem to come down from the top, it seems impossible. Well, how do I do this when I'm already getting all the solutions? And so one thing to consider is just at least questioning, well, what value do we think we are going to get out of this solution? So it's handed to me. I'm not going to change that tomorrow. Believe me, you won't change that tomorrow. It'll take a long time, right? But at least I know how to communicate to my team what kind of value I hope to get out of it, right? And so a lot of it in the beginning for us has been, well, we were reverse engineering stuff to try to figure out what value, so that at least we can measure it afterwards and start pointing to successes and maybe failures. Because the most expensive prototype is working software, right? And if a third of what we build is actually having a negative impact, we're spending a lot of money to kind of hurt our brands, right? Is anybody using OKRs in there? You are? Anybody else? And how far along are you in that?
It's something they started about a year ago.
Okay.
I haven't been too involved in some of the cool stuff.
But are they pretty visible to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. And I say it's hard because it's really easy to talk about, like, I'm going to measure this thing, right? That this thing's done. But it's really, really hard to start measuring if we're generating and creating the value. And then even beyond that, a lot of those key results are going to be real lagging indicators. And I need to know sooner than later that we're leading in the right direction. And so now I have to come up with some directional measure so I know that we're heading towards the goals that we set out for ourselves. And it's really hard. But once you write it, you're not done. You got to find ways to start measuring that. And hopefully your teams start to get inspired by this and they build that in. I know, otherwise you're going to go to some team that's responsible for data, probably, and they're going to start getting hit with a lot of requests, and you're not going to be able to measure anything because they're bogged down. So, but if your teams understand what the vision is, maybe they start building that into the solutions for you.
How do you avoid getting wrapped up in outputs versus outcomes? In other words, you spend all your time measuring what came out of the process as opposed to what actually resulted in the work was.
Right. So once you have these written, and once you start to actually measure, which implies you've delivered something, right? Because you can't measure business value on something that's not there. I don't know if you guys do demos or get in front of people who care about the work you do on a regular basis, but talk about that. You know, maybe we don't have a screenshot in a PowerPoint. Maybe we're going to talk about how much value we're seeing out of the things we've delivered in the past. Another thing is, what are we learning from our customers? What are we hearing? So maybe we're not really heading in the right direction, and we know that, and we understand what they really want, and so we're going to talk about that. And again, it's not overnight, because people are also going to say, yeah, but when are you going to be done with that next thing, right? But over time, what I'm hopeful of is if everybody starts to focus on the key results, and we can see that we're making progress towards those key results, maybe I'm not as concerned about when you're going to get that thing done. There's always going to be regulatory stuff. And so that's going to be a really easy excuse, right? We're unique, we're highly regulated, because none of you work for any companies that are highly regulated, I'm sure, right? So there's a lot of reasons that you can backpedal, but really it's make them visible, make them at the forefront, you know, talk about the output second, talk about the results first. Okay, so most of our ideas suck. So what? So the key theme here is that the customer's at the center of all we do, right? Solving their problems is what it's all about. Our ideas are guesses, and so we need some mechanism to be able to validate those things. And the key here too, maybe is, because I've heard this term discovery used to really replace requirement gathering, where you have maybe a BA or somebody from CX or somebody is out there gathering requirements from other people, maybe proxies, people who used to do a job 10 years ago, they were experts, and now they're the people who are telling you how people are doing the job today. You're not really in front of the actual person. So discovery is really validating all of these ideas with the people who are going to use the products you build, which is a novel idea. But my mind was kind of blown the first time I thought about that, right? Oh, makes sense. And then focusing on outcomes over output. So what are some ways we can do that? One thing I wish I had read a lot earlier in my career was about this jobs to be done theory. And I've got a link to the Harvard Business Review article where I came across it. I'd actually heard somebody talking about it at a conference and thought, okay, I'm going to dig into that. And the idea behind this is, you know, people don't want a drill bit, they want to make a hole. So they're buying your product to get a job done, and in that case, the job is making a hole, right? And the fundamental problem is most of the masses of customer data companies create is structured to show correlations. Like, these are millennials, this is what they care about, right? Or these customers in this demographic choose version A over version B 68% of the time. And I won't spoil the whole story, but the example they are using in this article is they were building condominiums for downsizers. And they had these focus groups. Like, they didn't ask what was your most memorable meal, they asked what's your favorite meal. So what do you want in a home, right? Do you want a bay window? Would that be good? Yeah, bay window, that'd be great. Granite countertops? Yeah, that'd be sweet, that's great. And so they did this, designed, people bought, but they were not selling at the pace that they had projected. So more focus groups. They finally started to understand that there's something missing, and they sat down with people who actually did end up buying, and they said, just tell us that story. Like, what was everything you went through before you decided to purchase? The funny thing here is I just went through this in some ways with my parents. They just downsized. And I relived this article during this too. So what they started to hear is this pattern of, as soon as I was able to find somebody to take the dining room table, I was able to move. Or my parents, they had a piano. They didn't want to just put it on the, on the sidewalk or whatever. And so basically they're trying to get rid of things that mean something to them. So the dining room table, like, kids did homework there, right? Had many meals there. I know most of the time spent at my parents' house in the last 20 years was at the dining room table. Would go over there for dinner, right? And so it meant something to them. So what they did, instead of adding any new features, is they gave free moving, not to my parents, unfortunately, and 6 months of free storage. So you don't have to worry about getting rid of that stuff anymore. We'll take care of that, and we'll even pay to move you. And you're gonna need that storage, and I found that out with my parents because they've got a storage bin full of stuff. And it's all probably gonna get thrown away, but they just weren't ready to get rid of it yet, right? So I really like that idea of thinking, what is it that people are trying to get done? What's the job they're trying to get done? So job's just a shorthand for that. Everything that's going on around them is what matters the most, to figure out what are they really trying to do. And the reason I say that, I wish I would have read this a lot earlier, is I was a BA for a long time, and I was going to those people who were subject matter experts, and I was not trying to figure out what people were actually trying to get done. I was trying to figure out, I don't know, what am I supposed to put on this screen? What's the data? So, has anybody used this in their work? I know some, you have?
Yeah, I think I did sales for a few years, and this really gets back to that whole feature versus benefit.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're trained to do in sales is to ask the customer is to draw out what the problem is, or at least invent in their mind that they've got a problem, and then show how your product, fulfills that by saying, well, this feature means you can do this, this, and this that you just told me is really important to you.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of doing it backwards. You're saying, okay, what are the problems you have? Well, let me figure out what feature you want.
Yeah. And I really like the idea, too, of, well, go ahead and why don't we talk to existing customers and find out why did they come to us, or why are they using the things we're using, the products that we build. So that's one approach. Another approach is that I really like, and I think we have to use this concept a lot, and it's definitely a startup concept, but I think it applies beyond startups, is do things that don't scale. So initially, if you're building some new feature, you're going to need to recruit, right? You're going to have to get people to use that thing, and when it's 100 people or 50 people, that's cool. When it's thousands of people, well, that doesn't scale, but at that point, it doesn't matter. You're probably doing different things anyway. So delighting them, which we all know, but the experience that they have, That's really important, right? So how are you creating just an insanely great experience? Your product's a component of that, but what's that whole experience? I like this fire. It's always worth asking if there's a subset of a market in which you can get a critical mass of users quickly. I know in the organization I work in, we kind of struggle with that. It's like, no, it's either on or it's off, you know? You can't go to market with just that. They'll have a broken experience. It's like, well, yeah, but we're just going to go after 20 people who already have a shitty experience because basically we've given them a really bad solution. Getting through that's difficult, and getting people okay with that's hard, but it's a great way to learn. Then this idea of the big launches, I think one thing I have not done well, and I've tried to do more and more lately, is try to explain just the pure complexity and dangers of big deliveries to your business partners, right? Because they're going to say, no, I don't want it until it's all done. UX showed me the prototype. I love it. Just go build it all, right? But that team, if they build all of that and launch it, has anyone been part of an 18-month project?
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years.
And they canceled the project at the end.
Oh, well, that was probably a relief. Can you imagine what would have gone wrong with... But it just doesn't go well, right? And then like everybody's miserable. The quality goes down because everybody's scrambling to fix things, and so we've got to figure out ways to iterate through that. I think there's there's definitely an emotional thing with the team going through the death march too. Like that's what that feels like, right? The interesting thing is you start acting differently. You suddenly work together. You collaborate. You try to make sure everybody understands, so everybody knows what we're going for. Suddenly, everybody can now be aware, but you only do that in the death march. So another concept, and again, all these slides have links to the articles I'm taking these from. So if any of them seem interesting, go dig in. But so then design thinking, is anyone familiar with design thinking? There. Yeah. So we go back to that whole empathy thing at the beginning, right? How do we empathize with our customers? How do we really, and this is with your customers. And at CarMax, they do something really interesting where I think it's Thursday afternoons. If you're on CarMax, you'll get a window pop up, says, hey, we'll give you $150. I don't know how much it is, but a gift card if you just let us interview you. And then there's one person on the other end of that phone having like a video conference with that customer. And they ask them a series of questions and then go on to the next one. But meanwhile, anybody in the company is invited to sit in and observe that as long as they participate in writing down what they're hearing. So what are some of those things you're hearing from those customers? Where are they complaining? Where are they happy? And then they try to map that all out as a group after to see where are their themes and where are there things we can learn from our customers. I know in our company, when we had engineers first listening to like calls from people calling in and complaining or frustrated, it's the first time they'd ever heard the voice of any of our customers, right? Because we also have this kind of problem where we think like if my software engineer isn't on a keyboard, we're not getting all the value out of them. And the truth is you're missing out on, as Marty Kagan would say, half the value because they aren't out there trying to understand what they can build to solve people's problems. They're building things that other people have told them, and they're probably spending an hour to 2 hours a day actually doing that because they're getting disrupted, they're getting pulled in different directions. So once you've empathized, you can kind of define that, analyze all those observations, ideate through maybe some ways we can solve those things, and then do prototyping. And I don't mean this like really glossy prototyping, I mean like on paper. So if you think about, if I show you something I just drew up real quick on paper, I don't think you're going to be as offended, or you're not going to be worried about me being offended. We just sketched it out, right? It's not like I put a lot of time into it. But at least now I have an idea of these things, what might be the most valuable. And then, of course, testing that. So, I think you can see that picture. I'm sure you can't read that, but it's not a linear thing. It's not like, yeah, we just go through that and we're done and we move on to the next thing, because hopefully we're learning along the way.
How does define minimum viable product,
Well,
or does it?
I don't know that term. I did have a slide I was going to throw up here. So that term's been used in a lot of different ways. I think you're certainly trying to find in this, what's the first thing I can give to my customer that'll provide value. I just know that like minimum viable product is the first thing I can test in some organization. I think that was how like Lean Startup kind of talk about it, whereas minimum viable product is the smallest thing I can deliver to start adding value to the organization. And then if you are like me and had any, and I'll admit, we introduced SAFE to our company a few years ago, and I'm ashamed of that. But it was good forcing function. It's all getting better now. So, but then like you take MVP and nobody even knows it means minimum viable product, and it's just a thing that's, again, in JIRA, a unit of work. So, but I think, yeah, going back to like, what you want to get to at the end of this is like, yeah, what's the easiest way I can solve this problem for this customer in a way that will make them happy and, bring some value to the organization.
The only issue I've seen with that is that you start doing little bits and pieces, and if you don't keep some kind of coordination in terms of architecture, you can end up with a bunch of stuff that doesn't talk to each other.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think you're, oh yeah, go ahead. Well, this whole test, this whole prototyping, I'm hoping you're throwing away ideas that you would have maybe built. Well, you'd throw them away. You've kind of proven that they're not going to add value. And you brought it, you know what I'm saying? Like, if I can prove this idea is probably not going to solve your problem, I don't want it in my backlog anymore. If it was a good enough idea, and it'll come up again and we can test again, but I need to get rid of that stuff. And you bring up an interesting point, because one thing I've heard from a lot of product managers and product owners and maybe release managers is like, man, that team just never hits their commitments. They're always overcommitting. It's like, well, clean out your backlog. You're the ones feeding the work in there, right? If you really want to try to put some constraints on things, you've got to do it up front too. It's not just, here's a bunch of stuff, I'm gonna, let's get to all this.
But it'd be part of keeping your stories, the scope of your stories small enough that you can get them done in, a couple days as opposed to 2 weeks. And we ran into that in my teams. We weren't sizing our stories down far enough. And
Yeah.
so we wouldn't even know that something was done until the end of the sprint. Well, that's too late.
Sure.
You got to get it. What we found is we get it in front of the user. Even a couple days in, we got maybe the first prototype of the form. We do a lot of forms, filling in forms and automating that process. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is get a filled-in mock-up of the form from data, like within a day or two, so that we can show it to them. Say, is all the formatting correct? Is this what you expected to see? And then we continue on. And that way we're getting that feedback as far as whether we want to continue the route we're going much earlier than we would if we waited until the very end and then did a demo.
Yeah, which is just, you're just doing a waterfall for 2 weeks, right?
Yeah.
But and so what I was really saying when they were complaining about overcommitting, it was on the things that we wanted to deploy to provide value, like the thing a customer is going to use. So that I would say, I want 50 things in production. I'm going to ask for all 50 of them. I know they've never delivered 50, but I'm going to put them all in front of them. Well, people are going to kind of overcommit then, but you can actually do something about that. I mean, if you assume good intentions, then they're not going to just stop working and go home when they're out of work, right? And if you're in, whatever tracking mechanism you use, you probably see if it's about time that I'm going to have to get something else in front of them. But so those are just a few discovery techniques that within them, there's maybe something that you can, give a try. Any one of them looks better than the other. You can dig in and learn more about it. Just wanted to give a basic overview. But I think the key is that there's some common themes. So is everybody familiar with Marty Kagan? Some, yes. So like I love the guy. So when I see the best product teams, they may frame the issue a little different and sometimes use a different nomenclature. But at the heart, I see three fundamental principles. So they're tackling the big risks early, figuring out solutions collaboratively, and focusing on solving problems. So all three of those things we just talked about were kind of independent ways of looking at product discovery, right? But all three of them are also handling all these risks. And I think that's the real key in it, is it's not like, well, okay, we'll go back to your organization and put in a process that everybody can follow to do product discovery. It's more so experiment with ways to hit these three principles. And so when we talk about big risks, he mentions a couple of them, but it's the value risk, do they want to buy it? Will they buy it? The usability risk, can they figure out even how to use this thing? Feasibility risk is, can we build this thing? And then I think, going back to that business risk is should we? Does this even make sense for us? So there's some constraints to our business, and we want to work within those, right? Unless we're saying, hey, let's look for a different direction to take our business. And so the key in all of that is that it's collaborative. So product management, they're going to be responsible for that value, right? But engineering's going to be responsible for the quality and knowing is this even feasible? Because they're the people who know technology probably better than any of us, right? And then in UX and design, they're kind of responsible for that usability piece. And it's that all of these folks are working together, rowing in the same direction. So they've got these goals. They know how they'll measure business success. They're working together to figure out what are the best ways we can solve these problems, what ideas aren't going to work, and then working together to get that product to market. So how many of you have like a CX or UX department team? And do they work collaboratively with your software engineers? Do they? Is your talk going to be a little bit more on that? Yeah, perfect. I'll stop. But I'm going to come to your talk for that because we struggle. We have teams who do that, and they work in silos, right? And we're trying to bring all that together because it really takes all of those people working together and all those different perspectives. Well, it's really just siloed elaboration is what I guess I would call it. There's a group of experts here that are really good at one thing and they're doing their thing, so they think it looks like one thing, and then another group of experts are out here doing their own thing. And often, and I know we're getting better at that, but often they're doing that way out ahead of the team, so that by the time it gets to the team, I don't know, like people are actually like using the prototype as a sales tool. Well, we haven't even built the thing yet, right? So
I guess my question is, why aren't your teams more cross-functional? Because that would eliminate that issue.
that's a hell of a question. And that's what we're trying to move towards. And this is, no, yeah, I know, it makes total sense. Why wouldn't we just have more cross-functional teams? I think there's organizational constraints. We think that it's impossible to work beyond organizational boundaries. I know we're working on that, though. And I think a lot of that comes from, well, if we all have shared goals and we all know the results we're trying to get, and we're all focused on whatever we're going to prioritize, whatever goals we're going to prioritize, it should be a little easier to do that. I think in large organizations, you try to go for efficiency instead of like really being effective. So I don't know, does anybody else experience things similar to that? Is it just me? No?
There's also a constraint just in the job market itself. So, one of the sort of things we strive for is people who have cross-functional skills. If you can develop, you should be able to test. But some people pigeonhole themselves to the point that they are only marketing themselves as a developer or as a tester. And in the same vein, you get people who only market themselves as a UX person, UX UI, and it's really unfortunate because there are a lot of very, very bright people who have more than one skill set, but they're so trained by HR and recruiters as to what they should do with their resumes that they get pigeonholed into these positions. And because there are so many people who are already pigeonholed in these positions, that's what HR and recruiters look for. It's a self-fulfilling cycle, self-fulfilling cycle.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, yeah.
To add on to that, there's a lot of pressure on management as well. They don't necessarily know if this tester has the dev skills necessary to complete this task, so they'll double up on a lot of these positions and then expect the UX designer to stick to that, or the tester to stick to this, whatever. You stick in those silos, and that's how you're taught to work because it's the least risky from your resume standpoint.
It's also, I think, easier to manage from the manager's point of view because they don't have to, I think some managers think they should know more about anything in particular than whoever they're managing. And the problem is that you can't be expert in everything, and I've had that problem. I used to contract, and that was one of the things I ran into quite a bit, is I built a pretty wide, I have a really wide and somewhat shallow skill set, but then there were deep pockets of it in different places. And I had a lot of recruiters that had no idea what to do with it, except those few projects where they needed somebody like that, and I was worth my weight in gold.
Yeah, well, that's probably going to be solved by a different talk. But, I mean, I think the point is that all the people you need to deliver your product are working together, and that, as opposed to working in their own silos and having a lot of handoffs, right? And that everybody really understands what you're going after. We really understand what value we could possibly deliver for our customers and our business. And we all share a responsibility to go after that. I think if just having that, it's going to kind of force different behavior changes. And maybe we will naturally just evolve into a more cross-functional team. And I don't know, maybe HR will catch up. So let's see. I'm definitely going to end early, but I had some things you could do about it. And maybe some of you are already doing some of this and you can share that. But one thing is connect your team with the people who use their products. It seems to be the easiest thing we can do, especially if the people who use your products are in your company. We've got people who build software for people who are 3 floors down. And it's amazing what happens when they start to see how they're using that software. I had to walk by a training room that would have claims examiners, and it was full like every month, and it was all training on a system I had delivered. And it's like months of training because we didn't have an intuitive system. And I was part of that problem. And so I had to see it every day. So go sit with them, see how they're using it. Listen to customer support calls. You've got probably customers who are happy. What are they happy about? How do we do more of that? And there's probably customers who aren't happy. Again, build mechanisms that allow your customers to provide feedback on the fly as they're using it. I think one of the tools lately we've been using is Medallion. A lot of really good information coming out of that, and like real time, and the product manager can see that real time, and they use that to make really good decisions. Is anybody else using anything to get feedback from your customers? Any other tools?
MPS, we talk to people mostly since it's
Got it.
but
Net promoter score.
There are other tools that we integrate within our product that helps us provide feedback.
Cool.
We use MPS as well, but we also have an initiative called Voice of the Client that customer support is constantly working with product management and development to let them know how's our customers using this, what is their needs, what's their wants,
Cool.
and then we're able to figure out.
Is that like, how does that get socialized with everybody in the organization?
The customer support team has consistent meetings as a cadence of meetings with product development
Okay.
and product management. Lets them know through analytics. We have an analytics team as well that works together, which is kind of like we were siloed before.
Yeah.
Now we're bringing together so that we can have the analytics to back up the data and to see using artificial intelligence and machine learning to see what's the common thread here with all of our customer support cases. Where's the biggest issue? And then we have a discussion around it with customer support, product management, and product development to see
How do we solve for that?
something
Yeah.
new, do we need to change something?
Yeah. Cool.
We take our developers or our entire cross-functional team, and for example, if our clients or customers is a corporate user, we'll go to the corporate office and chat with their job for a day, see what it is they're doing, understand what they're trying to achieve, understand and empathize with the problems, and then we'll ideate on ideas and solutions for that.
That's great. And that can be a humbling experience going and sitting with someone who's using your product, right? You start to see all these things that they just built into their process that you didn't intend, but because they're just kind of working around some challenges. Yeah. Got it. And so that's going to be only as good as the training, though, right? Yeah.
We use like feedback mechanisms in the tool itself, so you can put a survey there.
So I can just tell you right away how I'm feeling. That's great. I think there's just a lot of power in that because initially, like, you know, you can't have everybody going out and talking to all your customers, and some of your customers aren't happy with you, and you don't want people going out and talking to them and bugging them, right? So ways to get that feedback, they're just telling us. I think that's great. I think the power of sitting with a person and watching them use something that you and your team have created and really seeing like where we hit it and where we didn't, and if we're trying to reduce some operational costs, just like throw a team down with them for 2 months, right? You'll see some amazing things. So another thing you can do is kind of, like I was saying, establish some objectives and key results, or just at least make it a priority to every time you have this thing that you're going to deliver, everybody knows what kind of value you think it's going to provide, and make it measurable. I think creating a product vision so you can socialize that with your team, that's huge too, right? So everybody kind of knows where you're going. One way, and I'm sure some of you have tried this, but we kind of say, we'll start off with a year from now, you're going to have a press release. And it's going to be all about your product and what it does for people. Or what are customers saying a year from now about your product? And kind of trying to set that and give people a vision for that. Get them out of the mindset that I just need to get this stuff done and do more stuff after that. Again, use customer insights and data. It sounds like a lot of you are doing that, and that's great. That's what should be making our decisions. And then finally, don't be a pickle, which I have a good friend who is always like, when he's in a situation where he's like, I am not finding myself on the same page with anybody I'm with, he's always like, I feel like a cucumber in a pickle jar. So over time, if you've been in an organization a while, you tend to like question the things you're doing, and you can't get pickled because you're probably the only one who's going to help change that. So, and it's your responsibility to do that, because if you see it and you don't do anything about it, who else is? So I'll have to redo this slide. I've got a couple videos that I think are really good, and then a few things to read. I just started Build Trap by Melissa Perry, so I'm not done with it, but it's great so far. Marty Kagan's Inspired is a really sweet book. And then Felipe Castro's Guide to OKR is probably not as exciting to read, but it's really methodical, and it helps kind of, here's maybe what you shouldn't do, or here's where you fail, or a lot of organizations fail with doing this. And I know we still did some of those things, but the idea was we just want to start measuring, right? And I think a year and a half in, it's like people are starting to measure the results, and we're actually able to say, yeah, we are adding value. And then there's a couple videos and the links to all those folks' blogs. This video here, if you just type in Jeff Patton outcomes over outputs, it'll come up on like Vimeo. It's 11 minutes, and it is an awesome video to play right before you go into figuring out, well, maybe I want to write an OKR. Well, I'm getting everyone on the same page about what you're talking about. He does a really good job there. I don't have anything else if you guys don't. But if you want to talk more, I'll definitely be drinking at 3. So thank you for